What if I told you that becoming a medieval knight wasn't about glory? It was about surviving a decades-long hazing ritual that started when you were 7. Here's a fact that will blow your mind. According to historical records from 12th century training manuals, the average page spent more time scrubbing chamber pots and polishing boots than he ever did learning swordplay, and that was just year 1. Contemporary sources suggest that most boys sent into knightly training were essentially unpaid servants until their mid-teens, cleaning, fetching, and getting bruised by older squires who still remembered their own brutal initiations. If that just made you think, wait, what happened to the shining armor and heroic quests? Then you're going to absolutely hate what's coming next, because tonight we're pulling back the curtain on what it actually meant to be a medieval knight. And spoiler alert, it sucked. Hey friends, tonight we'll walk right through the heart of why being a medieval knight was one of the most grueling, thankless, and downright miserable jobs in history. Before you get comfortable, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because what you're about to hear isn't the legend, it's the cold, heavy truth beneath the armor. Why was knight training so harsh? You are 7 years old when the path to knighthood begins. Not with a sword, not with a horse, not with a ceremony, with a goodbye. Your parents are proud, maybe a little relieved, send you off to serve in the household of a noble lord. There are no hugs recorded in manuscripts, no tearful letters preserved in archives, just a pat on the shoulder, a bundle of clothing, and the weight of expectation settling on your small, still-growing frame. No one asks if you're ready. Readiness, as it turns out, is irrelevant. You are a page now. The castle looms above you, stone tower stretching into a grey sky. The gate creaks open, and what lies beyond is not a world of honor and glory. It's one of scrubbing, serving, and surviving. Let's be clear, chivalry will come later, after years of fetching, carrying, and cleaning up after horses and noblemen with equally foul temperaments. Picture this, you're standing in a stone hall, freezing, holding a tray of goblets you're not allowed to drink from. Your fingers are numb, your stomach is growling, and the knight you're serving doesn't even look at you. You are not yet one of them. You are the help. Here's where it gets worse. Your duties are endless. From sunrise to well after dark, you run errands, sweep halls, deliver messages, and assist with meals. On especially lucky days, you're permitted to polish armor, which sounds glamorous until you realize it means scraping dried mud and horse dung from heavy iron boots. Yes, really. Your hands are blistered, your back aches, and the knights, they barely notice you. According to records from medieval household accounts, pages were essentially unpaid labor-fed, yes, but worked harder than most adult servants. One 13th century steward's ledger lists boys for fetching as a separate line item. right below dogs for hunting, the medieval equivalent of an intern. Except the internship lasts a decade and there's no LinkedIn recommendation at the end. But even in these early days, training begins. Wooden swords are handed out like brooms. Bruises bloom across your arms as you spar with other boys who, like you, are eager to prove something. You're taught how to fall from a horse without breaking your neck. You fall often. Some days it feels like falling is the main lesson. No one praises you for bruising well, but they do scold you for weakness. You learn quickly. Pain is to be swallowed, not displayed. Imagine being told at age 8 that crying makes you unfit for knighthood. So you bite your lip. You swallow the sting, and you get back up. Discipline is everything. Speak only when spoken to. Bow deeper to those of higher rank. Never question a command, no matter how trivial or humiliating. Your mistakes are corrected with the back of a hand or a week of scrubbing chamber pots. One boy forgets to remove his cap in the presence of the lady of the house. He spends days on his knees in the chapel, praying for humility. No one forgets again. This wasn't abuse by medieval standards. It was education. The whole point was to break you down before building you back up. Strip away your childhood softness. Turn you into something harder, leaner, and more obedient. Would you have survived it? Honestly, if your family is wealthy, a tutor may be assigned to teach you reading, writing, and perhaps a bit of Latin, though the Latin mostly seems useful for understanding church services and inscriptions on tombs. If not, you learn by imitation. You listen. You memorize prayers. You copy letters with shaky hands when the steward is generous enough to share a scrap of parchment. Literacy is a luxury. Muscle and obedience matter more. Still, you learn. You learn which fork to use, though most prefer fingers. You learn to stand still for hours during court feasts, balancing platters of steaming meat while nobles talk politics and complain about the wine. You learn to stay invisible when tempers flare, and to disappear entirely when drunken knights start boasting about past battles. Every moment is an education in survival. Mornings begin with Mass. The castle chapel is cold year-round. Your breath fogs in the air as you kneel on stone floors and try not to fall asleep during the liturgy. Faith is not optional. It is as much a part of your training as swordplay. You are taught to fear hellfire, to respect the church, and to confess regularly. The priests speak of divine purpose, of holy duty. You nod along, trying to stay awake. Mostly, you pray not to get sick. There are few remedies and fewer recoveries. According to medieval medical texts, even minor infections could kill, and pages, packed into shared quarters, with poor hygiene, were especially vulnerable. One bad winter could wipe out half the boys in a household. So you pray, not because you're devout, because you're terrified. Meals are brief affairs, usually bread, cheese, and meat, if you're lucky. Vegetables are suspect. Many believe raw greens cause illness, and so you develop a steady diet of salted meat and dry crusts. You eat quickly, knowing your next task waits. On rare feast days, there may be roast pig or honeyed oat cakes. These days are remembered for years like dreams glimpsed through smoke. But here's the thing, even on feast days, you're still working, serving, watching nobles stuff themselves while your own stomach growls. It's like being a waiter at a banquet you'll never attend. In the evenings, the hall grows lively. Minstrels sing ballads, recounting tales of Arthur and Roland and saints who slayed dragons. You sit on the edges near the fire, trying to catch every word. The songs are meant to inspire, but you are too tired to be moved. You think more of your sore feet than of chivalric deeds. Still, something stirs in you. A hope, perhaps, that someday someone will sing of you. You sleep where you can often in the servants' quarters, shoulder to shoulder with other boys, on straw pallets that smell of sweat and mildew. Some nights you are pulled from sleep to help with late arrivals or unexpected guests. You learn to rise without complaint, to work through exhaustion, to never let your eyes betray fatigue. A knight must be ready at any hour. The training starts here. You are not alone. Other pages suffer with you. You form silent friendships built on shared glances and muttered complaints. Together, you learn the rhythms of castle life. You learn which knights are cruel and which will look the other way when you steal a second helping of stew. You teach who to trust, who to fear, and which corners of the castle offer a moment's peace. There are moments of levity, a jest from the cook, a clumsy knight tripping over a dog, a stolen apple. You cling to these moments. They remind you that life exists beyond duty, that laughter still has a place even here. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of the world beyond the walls. Merchants arriving with silks and spices, a troupe of performers, or a noble woman riding past with her retinue. These sights feel foreign, like stories glimpsed through fog. You're not part of that world yet, but that maybe one day. At times, doubt creeps in. The stories of glory feel distant. The reality, far more grinding. You wonder if all of this, the aching limbs, the scoldings, the hunger, is truly the path to honor. But every so often, you see a knight ride out in gleaming armor, pennon flying, and your chest tightens with longing. Someday, that could be you. Ask yourself, would you have kept going, or would you have run? Your lessons in humility do not stop with bruises and hunger. There are also ceremonies to attend. Even though you're barely more than background noise in them, you observe as nobles gather, dressed in fine fabrics you're not allowed to touch, much less wear. You're reminded by their glances and sometimes their words that your position is somewhere between useful and invisible. When dignitaries visit, the castle becomes a theatre. You help prepare guest rooms, polish silver, and sweep the same corridors 3 times over. If anything is out of place, the pages are blamed. And if something goes wrong, say, a dog bites a visiting bishop's leg, well, let's just say it helps to know how to avoid being seen. You quickly master the art of looking busy while being nowhere near the problem. On festival days, there is music, dancing, and too much wine. At least for the adults. You're allowed to watch from the corners, soaking in the sounds and sights while pretending not to be watching too intently. Occasionally, someone slips you a sweetmeat or a bit of cake, and for a moment the burdens of your position feel lighter. But these small kindnesses do not erase the reality. Your place is to serve, observe, and remember. Some pages find escape in books if they can read. The old steward's chamber holds a handful of illuminated manuscripts, heavy, bound in leather, and guarded as fiercely as the Lord's own armory. On lucky evenings, you're allowed to sit beside a fire and listen as an older scribe reads aloud tales of Roman generals or saints who endured unspeakable trials. These stories feed the mind while your body heals from the day's chores. There are warnings, too, spoken in hushed tones or muttered by older servants. They tell you of pages that failed to advance, boys who cracked under pressure or were sent home in disgrace. Sometimes they vanish without explanation. Sometimes you overhear things you were never meant to hear. You quickly learn when to speak, when to nod, and when to keep your head down. The castle is your crucible, and every hour spent within its walls forges you into something harder, leaner and more capable. Not a knight, not yet, but no longer a child. So, when you lie awake at night, staring at the wooden beams above your straw-filled mattress, you think not just of what you've endured, but of what lies ahead, the next phase, the next challenge, the next step on the path that will one day, if the gods, your lord, and your body all permit, make you a knight. But for now, you are a page, and that is enough. At the age of 14, the apron strings of pagehood are ceremoniously snipped, though not with any kindness or softness. You are no longer a page. You are now a squire, and while this new title may sound like a promotion, it comes with considerably fewer sweetmeats and far more bruises. You have graduated from polishing floors to polishing armor, from fetching goblets to fetching the man who might be dying in one. Your new role is personal, intimate, even. You are assigned to a knight, and you're expected to serve him as faithfully as a shadow. Where he goes, you go. If he rides into battle, you follow. If he falls, you run into the carnage to help him up, risking your own life in the process. You're no longer a child of the castle. You are the squire of a warrior, and your days are shaped by his demands. Let's talk about the physical training. It increases tenfold. Riding a war horse, for instance, is not the elegant glide you once imagined. These beasts are enormous, bred for power and war, and more temperamental than most noblemen. Mounting them is a small battle in itself. Controlling them, a constant negotiation. Your thighs ache, your spine jars with every step, your backside hasn't felt normal since Michaelmas. According to training manuals from the 14th century, squires were expected to ride for hours daily, sometimes in full gear to build endurance. One French text recommends riding until the body begs for mercy, then riding further still. The medieval equivalent of leg day, except it never ends. Sword. Training intensifies. You now wield live blades not to kill, but sharp enough to cause concern if your opponent happens to be better rested or less distracted than you. You spar daily. Your body is covered in bruises that never quite fade before new ones bloom. Every session is an exercise in humility. For every swing you land, you take 3 in return. The knight you serve doesn't expect grace. He expects grit. Imagine being told, if you can't block a blow, you deserve the scar. And then having that proven to you. Repeatedly, you learn to read an opponent's shoulder, their footwork, the split second before they commit. You learn to breathe through pain, to ignore the ringing in your ears after a helm strike. And you learn something else, too. Fear sharpens you, or it paralyzes you. There's no in-between. But perhaps the most tiresome part of your duties is equipment care. Armor, you quickly learn, is not just metal. It is an ecosystem. Sweat, grime, and the occasional slugs somehow make their way into the joints of plate mail. You clean it, polish it, and inspect every hinge and strap. If the greaves pinch or the helmet visor sticks mid-battle, that's your fault. If your knight dies because you missed a cracked buckle, you'll likely wish you'd died first. Weapons need sharpening daily. Lances must be tested. Shields were examined for cracks. Your knight's life and your reputation depend on the absolute precision of your work. No one thanks you when everything goes right, but everyone notices when it doesn't. According to household records from the 15th century, squires who failed in equipment maintenance could be dismissed without pay, or worse, blamed publicly if their knight was injured. It's like being an airplane mechanic, except the plane is also your boss, and if it crashes, you're fired or dead. And then there are tournaments. They were romanticized when you were a page. Colorful affairs of trumpets and cheering maidens. Now you see them clearly. Blunted swords still break bones. You are the one saddling the horse, carrying the lances, wiping the blood from your knight's cheek so he can smile for the crowd. If he wins, you collect the prize money. If he loses, you collect his broken ribs and what remains of his dignity. Picture this, you're standing in the mud, holding a replacement lance, watching your knight get absolutely demolished by a man twice his size. The crowd boos. Your knight limps off the field, and you have to help him remove his dented helmet while he mutters curses you didn't even know existed. That's a Tuesday. When real war comes, and it does, you march beside your knight into mud, rain, and uncertainty. Campaigns are long, uncomfortable affairs. Food is scarce, sleep is scarcer. Your armor, if you have any, chafes in places you didn't know existed. You begin to understand the real meaning of exhaustion, when your limbs move only because you know you must. Battle is not glorious. It is a cacophony of screams, metal, and orders lost in the wind. The clash of bodies, the stench of blood and sweat, the sudden silence of a dying man. These become your education. You learn to distinguish between fear that sharpens you and fear that paralyzes. You pray the former shows up more often. Here's the thing. You're not there to fight. Not yet. But that does not mean you are safe. When your knight is unhorsed, it is your job to reach him, lift him, and pull him out of danger. Imagine dragging a man in full armor, each piece weighing more than a holiday roast, across a muddy field while arrows fall like rain. It is not heroic. It is back-breaking. And the reward is usually just the chance to do it again tomorrow. When your knight is injured, you tend to his wounds. If he is captured, you're expected to negotiate or deliver messages to secure his release. Sometimes this means dealing with men who would rather see him rot. You learn diplomacy not from tutors but from necessity. Your words must be careful. Your posture is humble. Your tone is respectful. Even your silence becomes a tool. There are moments rare, but real when you feel proud. When you lead your knight's horse into camp and heads turn to look. When he nods at you after a battle, bloodied but alive. These moments are fleeting like sunlight through arrow slits, but they matter. They keep you going. Back at the castle, your duties continue. You train younger pages, passing on the same hard lessons you once learned. You serve at banquets, help organize hunts, and remain at your knight's side whenever guests of importance arrive. Your sword is worn, your boots are cracked, and you move like a man twice your age. But you are no longer a servant. You are being watched, evaluated, measured. The priests still expect your prayers. Your lord still expects your loyalty. Your body expects rest, which it rarely receives. But there is no turning back. The only way forward is through. You begin to think about your own coat of arms. What colors? What symbols? You dream about the moment of dubbing, the sword tapping your shoulders, the moment you rise not as a squire, but as a knight. It feels impossibly far. It feels inevitable. It feels both. Then there are the hard days. The days when you bury a fellow squire trampled beneath a war horse, or run through by a lance that didn't look blunted enough. No one sings songs for squires. No one writes poems for the boys who almost made it. You learn to carry grief without showing it. You learn to keep working even as the ground shifts beneath you. If you are lucky, your knight teaches you more than battle. He teaches you how to think, how to judge a man's character, how to read a battlefield, how to lead. If he is wise, he teaches you when to speak and when to hold your tongue, how to pick your battles, and how to lose with grace. These are not things armor can protect you from, but they are just as vital. Winter brings new challenges. You now understand that a sword is only as effective as the hand that can still feel its hilt. Your fingers crack from the cold, and the metal of your knight's armor feels like ice as you buckle it on each morning. Snow turns the training yard into a mire of frozen mud. Horses slip. So do you? You do not complain. The weather, like war, does not care how you feel. There is talk among the older squires, talk of glory, of rebellion in the east, of a king's summons. You listen, absorb, calculate. You've seen enough to know that glory often looks like a grave. Still, you would ride out tomorrow if called. The waiting, you realize, is often worse than the war. You write your first letter. It is stiff, clumsy, and formally addressed to your parents, if they are still alive, and tells them little. You're not even sure where to send it, but writing it feels important, like anchoring yourself, like proving you're still someone beneath the bruises, sweat, and steel. One night, after a feast, your knight, drunk on mead and nostalgia, tells you of his first campaign. He describes the rain, the hunger, the thrill of surviving the charge. Then he grows quiet. He stares into the fire and names 3 men who did not return. You do not speak. You are meant to. Listen and remember. You practice daily. Sometimes in secret. You mimic your knight's stance, his footwork, the way he holds his blade just before a strike. You copy everything, hoping that imitation will one day become instinct. You bleed, you limp, you learn. Then one morning, without fanfare, your name is called. You are to ride with your knight, not as an observer, but as his second. There is no sleep the night before. No sleep is needed. When you mount your horse, you are ready. Not perfect, not fearless, but ready. Your story is still being written, but already it is etched into the cold iron of swords, the dust of roads, and the calluses on your hands. You are no longer a boy, not quite a man, but closer now. You are a squire, and you are becoming. And if you survive, if you endure the bruises, the exhaustion, the fear, the cold, then one day, perhaps, you will kneel. And when you rise, you will no longer be becoming. You will be. What pressures did knights really face? You're 21 years old, or near enough. Some squires are knighted younger, some older, but the number doesn't matter half so much as the fact that someone in authority has finally decided you're ready. Ready to kneel, ready to swear, ready, in theory, to kill and die with a little more official ceremony attached. There's no sudden transformation. You don't wake up with a deeper voice or a firmer jawline. You're still sore from yesterday's training, still have mud on your boots and a scar across your shoulder that won't quite heal. But this is the moment your entire youth has crawled toward your body bruised, your pride battered, your hands hardened by years of polishing, sharpening, carrying and serving. It has all led here, to the day of your knighthood. Let's start with the vigil. It begins with solitude. You're given a small and cold chamber in which to pray, reflect, and fast through the night. There's nothing glamorous about it. Just stone walls, a single candle, and a chapel supplied. Blanket that somehow manages to be both thin and scratchy. You kneel on the floor, bones aching, stomach growling, and try not to think about the warmth of the kitchens or the scent of roasting pork wafting from below. This vigil is meant to purify the soul, to prepare you to accept the sacred duties of a knight. You're expected to meditate on the responsibilities ahead, defending the weak, serving your Lord, and upholding the church. In practice, you spend as much time wondering whether anyone would notice if you had a sip of water or sat down. For 5 blessed minutes, according to religious texts from the period, the vigil was supposed to mirror Christ's suffering. One 13th century bishop wrote that a knight must know discomfort before he knows duty. Translation: enjoy your night of misery. It's spiritual. You're not alone in your discomfort. Dozens of squires have kept this vigil before you, some trembling with anticipation, others feign serenity. You wonder which you are. You try to remember all the prayers, the creeds, the proper posture. You try not to think about the rumors of squires vomiting from nerves during the ceremony or passing out mid-kneel. That would be unfortunate. Memorable, but unfortunate. Come dawn, you are escorted to the main hall. It is transformed for the occasion. Banners hang, candles flicker, nobles, knights, and priests gather in ceremonial dress, whispering politely behind gloved hands. A hush falls as you enter. Your name is announced. You, Neo, your lord or perhaps the king, depending on your station, approaches. He carries a sword, a symbol of service and power. It may not be his own blade. Some lords keep a ceremonial sword just for this purpose, polished to a mirror shine and never used in battle. You try not to look too closely. You try not to shake. The sword taps your shoulders, left, then right. The dubbing. In some traditions, you're also reminded of a symbolic slap of the physical and moral pain you must now endure without complaint. It's less of a blow and more of a firm pat. But the message is clear. A knight's duty is not to comfort, but to sacrifice. Then comes the oath. You speak solemnly, pledging loyalty to your liege, to God, and to the ideals of chivalry. You promise to defend the weak, to protect women, to speak the truth, and to fight with honor. You repeat the words with as much gravity as you can muster, though you silently wonder how many knights still live by them. With the oath complete, you rise, not as a boy, not as a servant, but as a knight. The change is subtle, internal, and yet profound. People who barely glanced at you yesterday now nod in solemn approval. Your peers clap your shoulder. Your lord offers a tight-lipped smile which, by noble standards, might as well be a standing ovation. There may be a feast afterward, depending on the wealth of your lord or the mood of the court. If so, you sit a little higher at the table, drink from a finer cup, and receive congratulations from nobles you once served wine to. Some squires are knighted on battlefields, their ceremony improvised amidst carnage. Others receive the full pageantry. Either way, the weight of the title settles on your shoulders, heavy as chainmail. Knighthood, as it turns out, is not a destination. It's a doorway. Here's where it gets interesting. The world does not slow down for you to enjoy your new status. Your duties expand immediately. You're now expected to lead men, not follow them. To make decisions, not simply obey. To ride at the front, not the rear. The same sword that dubbed you a knight is now yours to wield, and no one will double-check your choices anymore. If you err, It will be public, and it will be costly. You're also now accountable in new ways. A knight's word is binding. Your signature carries weight. Your absence from court is noted. Your presence in church is assumed. If you drink too deeply or speak too freely, it reflects not only on you, but on your household, your banner, and your liege. A slip of the tongue can sour alliances. A drunken scuffle can undo months of diplomacy. In short, your margin for error shrinks dramatically the moment your shoulder is tapped with a sword. Your responsibilities extend beyond battle. If your lord grants you land, you are expected to manage it wisely. That means collecting taxes, settling disputes among peasants, maintaining roads, and ensuring the harvest is strong. Knights are often imagined as warriors alone, but in truth they are administrators, enforcers, and landlords. Your sword may rest in its scabbard for months at a time, but your seal is pressed into wax almost daily. You also now have your own squire. The irony is not lost on you. He's young, uncertain, and eager to please. You teach him to polish your armor just so, to saddle your horse without bruising its haunches, to pour wine without spilling. You correct him gently at first, then more firmly. He reminds you of yourself. It is humbling and slightly amusing to see how far you've come, and how far you still have to go. Then there's the matter of your coat of arms. If you haven't had one before, it must now be chosen. Colors, symbols, family mottos, they all matter. They identify you on the field of battle and in court. They speak before you do. A red lion rampant on a field of gold says something very different than a black cross on a white. Bend, choose wisely, or pay a herald to help. Your new armor is fitted to your frame, assuming your lord is generous, or your family still has coin to spare. A full plate is expensive, and every piece must be custom-made. Greaves for your legs, gauntlets for your hands, a cuirass for your chest. You stand still as the blacksmith measures and clinks, their fingers leaving soot on your skin. The weight is impressive. Walking in it feels like learning to move all over again, but you feel safe inside it, too, as if metal might guard not only your body, but your name. You take your first formal ride through the village not as a servant trailing behind a retinue, but at its head. Children run to the roadside. Old men bow stiffly. A woman tosses you a flower. You try not to look too pleased. The peasants don't cheer, exactly, but they do stare. And in the medieval world, attention is a kind of applause. That night, in the solitude of your chamber, you remove each piece of armor slowly, methodically. You place your sword with care. You stare at your reflection in the polished plate and try to see what others saw today. A knight, a protector, a leader. You do not quite believe it yet, but you will. But here's the thing, not everything changes overnight. You still train each day. You still wake early and pray. You still limp after a long ride and wince when a blade catches your elbow. But your name is called with more weight now. You are consulted, not commanded. The youngest squire eyes you with something like awe or fear, possibly both. War will come again. You know this, and when it does, your position in the vanguard will be expected. No more standing behind a shield wall. No more waiting for orders. You will lead the charge. Raise your voice above the din, and be the first to cross the field. If fortune favors you, you may return with honor. If not, your coat of arms will be carried home without you. This is the cost of the accolade. This is the burden of the oath. But still, you are proud, not of your status, but for your survival. You endured the long years, the cold vigils, the humiliation, the training, the fear, and now you wear the title as a second skin. You are a knight, and your real service has only just begun. What no one tells you, what the songs and the ceremonies conveniently leave out, is that becoming a knight doesn't solve your problems. It multiplies them. Let's talk about debt. You thought squirehood was expensive? Try knighthood. Armor costs a fortune. A full suite of plates can run you the equivalent of several years' income. And it's not a one-time purchase. It needs constant maintenance, replacement parts, and upgrades. According to financial records from 14th century English estates, knights often borrowed heavily to maintain their equipment. One Yorkshire knight's ledger shows he owed 3 different moneylenders, plus his own brother, just to afford tournament fees and a new warhorse, the medieval equivalent of maxing out your credit cards to look successful. And then there's your household. You're expected to maintain a certain standard of living. Servants, horses, a decent hall, and wine for guests. If you can't afford to host a visiting lord properly, you're seen as weak. If you can't field armed men when called, you're useless. So, you borrow. You mortgage land. You take on contracts you don't want just to keep the coins flowing. Here's where the pressure really builds. You're not just responsible for yourself anymore. You're responsible for everyone who depends on you. Your squire, your servants, your tenants, your family. If you have one, if the harvest fails, they look to you. If bandits raid, they look to you. If the Lord calls for taxes and no one can pay, they look to you. And what do you have? A sword, a title, and a growing sense that you're one bad season away from losing everything. Some knights handle this by becoming enforcers, collecting rents with brutality, squeezing peasants for every coin. Others try to win glory in tournaments or war, hoping a big prize or a land grant will solve their problems. Most just endure, quietly, desperately. Ask yourself, would you have been able to juggle all of that? The debt, the expectations, the constant need to appear strong even when you're barely holding on. And then there's the Lord you serve. He is not your friend. He is your employer, your landlord, your judge. He can summon you at any time, for any reason. A border skirmish, a tournament, a petty family feud, a wedding. You are expected to drop everything and ride. No questions asked. If you refuse, you're disloyal. If you hesitate, you're weak. If you ask for compensation, you're greedy. According to feudal contracts from the period, knights owed their lords a set number of days of military service per year, usually 40. But in practice, lords often demanded more, and saying no wasn't really an option. One French knight's correspondence shows him begging his lord for leave to attend his own daughter's wedding. The lord refused. The knight rode to war instead. Duty over family. Always. But it's not just your lord. There's also the church. The priests expect you to attend Mass, to tithe generously, to support church causes, to go on crusade if called. And if you don't, well, there's always the threat of excommunication, or just a very pointed sermon where the priest describes the sins of prideful, greedy knights while staring directly at you. You're trapped between two masters, God and your liege, and both demand everything. Some knights found escape in piety, donating land to monasteries, going on pilgrimage, or even retiring to monastic life. Others just drank a lot. Medieval account books show suspiciously high wine expenditures among knights. One 15th century German knight's household consumed over 100 gallons of wine in a single winter. The medieval equivalent of I need a drink turned into a lifestyle. Then there's the matter of marriage. If you're a knight of any standing, you're expected to marry. Preferably someone who brings land, coin, or useful alliances. Love? That's optional. Nice if it happens, but not required. Your marriage is a business transaction, and like all business transactions, it comes with pressure. You're expected to produce heirs, preferably sons. If you don't, your land might revert to your lord. Your name might die out. Your legacy gone. And if your wife is unhappy, if she complains about your long absences, your debts, your injuries, well, that's just another pressure to manage. Some knights had good marriages, partnerships built on mutual respect and shared burdens. Others had nightmares of cold, distant arrangements where both parties resented each other but had no choice but to endure. Medieval letters between spouses reveal the strain. One English lady wrote to her knight husband, begging him to return home because bandits had raided their manor. He wrote back, "I cannot. The king requires my service." She managed the crisis alone, as many did. And let's not forget the pressure to perform. Every time you ride out, whether to war, a tournament, or just a formal procession, people are watching. Your lord is evaluating you. Your peers are comparing themselves to you. Your enemies are looking for weakness. One bad showing at a tournament, and you're a laughingstock. One cowardly retreat in battle, and you're branded a disgrace. You can't afford to fail, not publicly. So you push through injuries. You fight even when you're exhausted. You smile even when your ribs are cracked and your shoulder is dislocated, because showing weakness is worse than being weak. According to chronicles from the period, several knights died from untreated wounds, not because treatment wasn't available, but because they refused to admit they were hurt. Pride, it turns out, kills just as effectively as swords. And here's what really gets me. There's no retirement plan. You don't just stop being a knight. There's no pension, no 401k, no gold watch and a nice send-off. You serve until you die, or until you're too broken to serve, at which point you become a burden. Some aging knights retired to monasteries, donating their remaining land to the church in exchange for care. Others lived out their final years in poverty, forgotten by the lords they once served. One account from 15th century France describes an elderly knight begging for alms outside a church, still wearing a tattered surcoat with his faded coat of arms. No songs were sung for him. No one remembered his name. So, yes, you survived the training. You earned the title. You wore the armor. But now comes the real test. Living as a knight, juggling debt, duty, and danger, managing land, family, and expectations, serving lords who demand everything and give little in return. This is the pressure no one talks about, the weight that doesn't come from steel, but from the sheer impossibility of meeting every demand placed on you. And it never, ever stops. You thought the pressure would ease once you proved yourself. It doesn't. If anything, it gets worse, because now everyone knows your name, and that means everyone has expectations. Your lord expects loyalty. Your peers expect competence. Your family expects provision. The church expects piety, the peasants expect protection, and you're just trying to survive another season without losing everything. Let's talk about reputation. In the medieval world, your reputation was currency. It's more valuable than a coin, more important than land. A good reputation opens doors. A bad one closes them permanently. If you're known as brave, lords will hire you. If you're known as honorable, allies will trust you. If you're known as skilled, tournament organizers will invite you. But if you're known as a coward, as unreliable, as someone who breaks oaths, you're finished. According to chronicles from the period, knights obsessed over their reputations. They challenged rivals to duels over perceived slights. They went to absurd lengths to prove their courage, sometimes dying in the process. One 14th century French knight reportedly rode into enemy territory alone, just to prove he wasn't afraid. He was captured, ransomed, and bankrupted his family. But hey, at least people knew he was brave. Here's where it gets brutal. Your reputation isn't just built on what you do. It's built on what people say you did. Rumors spread faster than plague. And once a story takes hold, truth doesn't matter. Maybe you retreated tactically during a battle, a smart move that saved lives. But the story that spreads, he ran like a coward. Maybe you refused to duel because it was stupid and pointless. But the story, he was too afraid to fight. You can spend years building a good name and lose it in a single afternoon. Picture this. You're at a feast. A rival knight, drunk and bitter, loudly accuses you of cheating at a recent tournament. He claims you bribed the judges. It's a lie. Complete fiction. But now everyone's heard it. And even if you challenge him and win, the whisper remains. Well, maybe there was some truth to it. The pressure to defend your honor becomes exhausting. Every insult must be answered. Every challenge must be met. Because if you let even one slight pass, people assume you're weak. So, you fight duels you don't want. You make enemies over nothing. You waste time, energy, and coin just to prove you're not someone to be messed with. Medieval court records are full of these disputes. Knights are suing each other over insults, demanding public apologies, challenging each other to a fight over who had the right to wear certain colors. It's like high school drama, except everyone's armed and people actually die. One English knight challenged another because the man sat in his usual spot at a banquet. The dispute escalated. Both were wounded in the resulting duel. Neither won anything except scars and legal fees. And then there's the pressure of comparison. You're constantly being measured against other knights. Who won the last tournament? Who fought bravest in the last battle? Who has the finest armor, the fastest horse, the most impressive retinue? It's a never-ending competition. If Lord Edmund's knight just won 3 tilts in a row, your lord expects you to do better. If Sir Hugh just captured an enemy banner, you're expected to capture 2. You can never just be good enough. There's always someone doing more, achieving more, and being more. According to tournament records from the 15th century, knights would go into debt just to afford better equipment, not because they needed it, but because they couldn't stand being outshone. The medieval equivalent of keeping up with the Joneses. Except the Joneses have lances and a dangerous need to prove themselves. Let's talk about the battlefield pressure. When war comes, you're expected to lead, to inspire, to be the first into danger and the last to retreat. But here's the thing, you're terrified. Every knight is. The songs don't mention it. The poems ignore it, but the fear is always there. You know that one arrow, one lucky spear thrust, one slip in the mud, and you're done dead. Or worse, crippled and dependent on others for the rest of your life. But you can't show fear, not to your men, not to your lord, not even to yourself. So, you smile, you joke, you clap your squire on the shoulder and tell him everything will be fine. And then you ride into chaos. The weight of command is crushing. You're responsible for the men who follow you. If you make a bad decision, they die. If you lead them into an ambush, their blood is on your hands. And afterward, if you survive, you have to write letters to their families. Or worse, deliver the news in person. According to letters preserved from the 100 Years' War, knights often agonized over these duties. One English knight wrote to his wife after a disastrous skirmish, "I lost 6 good men today. I do not know how to face their widows. There's no training for that. No manual on how to live with those faces in your memory." Some nights turned cold, detached. It was easier than feeling. Others drank, or prayed obsessively, or just stopped sleeping. Ask yourself, could you have carried that weight? The knowledge that your choices determined who lived and who didn't. And then there's the pressure to win, not just survive win. Your lord doesn't reward you for doing your best. He rewards results, captured enemies, seized territory, plundered wealth. If you come back empty-handed, you're a disappointment. If you lose, you're a failure. So you take risks you shouldn't. You push harder than is wise. You stay in the fight even when you should retreat. Because losing isn't just tactical, it's personal. It's proof that maybe you don't deserve the title. Maybe you're not actually good enough. Medieval military chronicles are filled with knights making desperate, reckless decisions not because they were stupid, but because the pressure to prove themselves was overwhelming. One knight charged alone into an enemy formation during a siege, trying to be the first through the breach. He was killed instantly. His lord called it regrettable but noble. His family called it a waste. Let's talk about political pressure. You're not just a warrior, you're a political player whether you like it or not. Every decision you make has consequences. Who you ally with? Who do you insult? Whose daughter will you marry? Which lord do you serve? One wrong move and you're caught in a web of feuds, betrayals and vendettas that can last generations. Medieval politics were vicious. The lords played knights against each other. Rivals spread rumors. Alliances shifted overnight. And you're just trying to stay on the right side of whoever's winning. According to historical records, knights who backed the wrong faction often lost everything: land, title, and even their lives. During the Wars of the Roses, English knights constantly had to choose Lancaster or York. Guess wrong, and your family is ruined. Some knights tried to stay neutral, but neutrality was seen as cowardice or worse, disloyalty to both sides. There was no safe choice, only risky ones. And here's what nobody tells you: the pressure never takes a day off, even at home. Even in peacetime, you're managing, watching, calculating. You smile at rivals you'd like to punch. You flatter lords you despise. You attend endless ceremonies, feasts, and councils performing the role of the loyal, honorable knight. It's exhausting. One moment, you're settling a dispute between the peasants over a stolen chicken. The next time you're hosting a visiting dignitary who's clearly sizing you up for weakness. You can't relax. You can't let your guard down, because everyone is watching. Everyone is judging. And one mistake, one moment of weakness or honesty can undo years of careful reputation building. Then there's the pressure from your own body. You're not getting younger. Every injury takes longer to heal. Every cold hurts worse. That shoulder you dislocated 3 years ago, it clicks now. That knee you twisted in a fall, it aches when it rains. And it always rains. But you can't slow down. You can't admit you're not as strong as you used to be. So, you push through. You grit your teeth. You tie on your armor even when every joint screams in protest. Medieval medical texts describe knights suffering from chronic pain, old battle wounds that never healed properly. One physician's manual from the 14th century recommends rest and prayer for aging. Knights, rest. What's that? And let's not forget the existential pressure. You're supposed to be a hero, a protector, a symbol of everything good and noble. But you know the truth. You've done things you're not proud of. You've killed men who probably didn't deserve it. You've followed orders that made you sick. You've burned villages because your lord said to. You've stood by while peasants were abused. You've taken spoils from the dead. And every Sunday you kneel in church and confess, and the priest absolves you, and you go back out and do it again, because that's the job. Some knights found peace with this. They told themselves they were following orders, doing their duty, serving a higher purpose. Others carried the guilt like a stone around their necks. Medieval confession records, yes, priests kept notes, reveal knights agonizing over moral compromises. One confession from 1347 records a knight saying, "I do not know if God will forgive me. I am not sure I deserve it." So, here's the reality. Being a knight isn't about glory. It's about pressure. Pressure to perform. Pressure to win. Pressure to maintain your reputation, your wealth, your honor. Pressure to lead men into danger and bring them home alive. Pressure to smile at enemies and bow to lords you'd rather strangle. Pressure to be strong when you're breaking. To be brave when you're terrified. To be honorable when honor costs you everything. And you carry it all, every day, with no breaks, no help, and no one who truly understands. Because admitting the pressure, that's a weakness. And weakness in the medieval world is death. You manage somehow. You develop routines. You find small comforts in a good war horse, a loyal squire, a quiet moment by the fire. You learn to compartmentalize, to separate the knight from the man, to put on the armor and the role and leave your doubts behind. And on the best days, you remember why you wanted this. Not for the glory, not for the songs, but because someone had to stand between the chaos and the people who couldn't. That's what you tell yourself anyway, on the days when the pressure feels unbearable, because the alternative, admitting it was all a mistake, is too much to bear. So, you keep going, keep riding, keep fighting. You carry the weight, the debt, the expectations, the guilt, the fear. You carry it because that's what knights do. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real test of knighthood. Not the battles you win, but the pressures you endure. And you endure day after day, year after year, until one morning you wake up and realize you're still here. Scarred, exhausted, barely holding on, but still here. And that, in the brutal world of medieval knighthood, is its own kind of victory. How painful was life in armor? You do not become a knight and immediately feel powerful. You become a knight, and then you are handed 60 pounds of steel and told to get on a horse. The first real lesson of knighthood is not how to fight, but how to walk, breathe, and not fall over in your own armor. At first, it's chainmail, a shirt of interlocking rings that drapes over your shoulders like an iron tunic. It's not as heavy as it looks, but it clings to you, drags at your limbs, and catches every drop of sweat your body produces beneath it. You wear a padded gambeson quilted linen stuffed with wool or rags, which smells awful after a single skirmish and worse after a week. But it keeps the mail from grinding against your skin like a cheese grater. According to medieval arming manuals, the gambeson was considered essential, not optional. One 14th century text warns, "He who wears mail without padding will know suffering, and his flesh will speak of his foolishness." Translation, you'll be shredded like cabbage. As warfare evolves, so does your kit. Plate armor begins to replace mail. At first, just a breastplate and greaves, then pauldrons for your shoulders, vambraces for your forearms, subalterns to encase your feet, articulated joints, riveted segments. Each edition is designed to protect without pinching, though they almost always manage to do both. Eventually, you are sheathed in metal from crown to toe, and it's less like wearing clothes and more like being folded into a walking bell. The helmet is the worst. It muffles your hearing, narrows your vision, and steams up with your own breath in battle. It protects your skull. Outside of battle, it functions mostly to give you a throbbing headache. Some helmets have visors you can lift, which helps with breathing and spitting, though it also makes your face an easier target. Trade-offs are everywhere in armor. Here's the thing, mobility, surprisingly, is not impossible. You can run, squat, mount a horse, even roll, if trained well. But everything takes effort. You are not agile. You are deliberate, and you quickly learn to conserve movement like a man counting his last coins. After all, if your opponent wears nothing heavier than boiled leather, he'll be darting around while you resemble a mobile sculpture of St. George, picture this. You're sparring in a full plate. Your opponent is in light gear. He circles you, quick as a cat. You swing. He dodges. You swing again. He dodges again. By the third swing, you're panting. By the fifth, you're questioning your life choices. And he's barely broken a sweat. Then there's the maintenance. Every piece must be cleaned, oiled, and inspected. A single rusted rivet can jam a joint. A dented chest plate can buckle under a second blow. Your squire becomes a blacksmith's apprentice overnight, scrubbing and hammering late into the evening. If he forgets a strap or fails to fasten your quizzes correctly, you notice, painfully, and immediately. According to household records from the 15th century, armor maintenance consumed hours daily. One knight's ledger shows payments to 3 different armorers in a single year just for repairs. The medieval equivalent of car maintenance, except your car can also get you killed if the brakes fail. And let's not forget, armor costs a fortune. A full suite of plates could cost the equivalent of a small manor. Most knights couldn't afford it outright. They borrowed, inherited, or pieced together mismatched sets over the years. Some wore their grandfather's breastplate with a cousin's gauntlets and a borrowed helm that didn't quite fit. Fashion secondary, function questionable, but it was better than nothing. Let's talk about what it actually feels like to wear armor all day. The weight is distributed across your body, yes, but that doesn't mean it's comfortable. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack. Now imagine that backpack covers your entire body, presses on your shoulders, digs into your hips, and makes every movement a negotiation. That's armor, and you're expected to wear it for hours, sometimes all day, sometimes while marching, sometimes while fighting. Your shoulders ache within an hour. Your lower back starts screaming by hour 2. By hour 3, you'd sell your soul for 5 minutes without metal pressing into your collarbones. But you can't take it off. Not in enemy territory. Not during a siege. Not when your lord might call for you at any moment. So, you endure. Now let's talk about heat. Summer in a full suite of plates is like walking inside a forge. The sun beats down, the metal heats up, and you're essentially cooking inside your own armor. You sweat buckets, literally. By the end of a hot day, you can pour sweat out of your gauntlets like emptying a cup. According to accounts from the Crusades, where European knights fought in the scorching Middle Eastern heat, dehydration was a constant threat. Knights fainted. Some died, not from combat, but from heat stroke. One chronicler described a knight who removed his helm after a march, and steam rose from his head like a kettle. Not an exaggeration, just medieval air conditioning. And in winter, it's just as bad. Cold metal against your skin feels like touching ice. Even with the gambeson, the chill seeps through. Your fingers go numb inside your gauntlets. Your toes freeze inside your sobotones. And if you're riding, the wind cuts through every gap in your armor like a knife. Some knights stuffed extra cloth into their armor for insulation. Others just suffered. One winter campaign record from 1356 notes that several knights developed frostbite on their fingers despite wearing gloves because the metal gauntlets conducted cold so efficiently. The medieval equivalent of holding an ice cube for 6 hours straight. Ask yourself, could you have handled that? The heat in summer, the cold in winter, and no escape from either. Then there's the issue of, let's call it personal needs. You're sealed in metal, head to toe. And nature, as they say, calls. Going to the bathroom in full armor is a logistical nightmare. Some pieces can be removed quickly, others, not so much. You need help, your squire's help, which means your most private moments become a team effort. It's not dignified, it's not pleasant, but it's necessary. Medieval soldiers developed strategies. Drink less during the day, go before donning armor, and if all else fails, just deal with it. Chronicles from long sieges mention knights who simply relieved themselves in their armor rather than waste time removing it. Gross, absolutely. Practical, unfortunately, yes. Let's talk about injuries caused by the armor itself. You'd think the armor would only protect you, but it can hurt you too. Straps dig into your shoulders, leaving deep grooves in your skin. Buckles pinch, edges chafe, and if a piece doesn't fit quite right, it rubs the same spot over and over until you're bleeding. Medieval medical texts describe armor wounds, blisters, cuts and sores caused not by combat, but by the equipment itself. One 15th century surgeon's manual recommends applying salve to the places where the iron bites, a poetic way of saying your armor is eating you alive. And if you take a hit, the armor doesn't just absorb the blow, it transfers the force into your body. A mace strike might not penetrate your breastplate, but it'll crack your ribs underneath. An arrow might not pierce your helm, but it'll give you a concussion from the impact. According to battlefield records, many knights died not from wounds that broke through their armor, but from internal injuries caused by blunt force trauma. The armor saved them from being stabbed, but it couldn't save them from being crushed. And here's what really gets brutal. If you fall, getting back up is hard. The armor is heavy. The ground is uneven. And if you're in mud, snow, or blood-slicked grass, you're essentially a beetle on its back. You flail. You struggle. You pray someone helps you up before an enemy sees you. Because a knight on the ground is a target. A slow, helpless, extremely valuable target. Many knights were captured simply because they couldn't stand up fast enough. Others were killed where they lay, stabbed through gaps in their armor while they struggled to rise. One account from the Battle of Agincourt describes French knights drowning in mud, not because the mud was particularly deep, but because they were unable to get up once they fell. Their armor, designed to protect them, became their coffin. Then there's the psychological weight. Yes, the armor is heavy physically, but it's heavy mentally too. Every time you put it on, you're preparing for violence, for pain, for the possibility of death. The ritual of arming piece by piece, strap by strap, becomes a meditation on mortality. You think about the last time you wore it. Who did you fight? Who didn't come home? Some knights developed a kind of reverence for their armor. It had saved them after all. They cleaned it carefully, repaired it tenderly, spoke to it even. Others grew to hate it, a constant reminder of the life they'd chosen, the weight they'd carry until they died. Medieval poetry occasionally touches on this. One 14th century verse describes a knight removing his armor and feeling lighter in body, but no less burdened in soul, because the armor might come off, but the memories don't. And let's not forget, armor is loud. Every step clanks, every movement jingles. You can't sneak anywhere. Forget ambushes, forget quiet reconnaissance. When you're in full plate, everyone within 100 yards knows you're coming. It's like wearing a suit made of bells. Some knights tried to muffle their armor with cloth wrappings. Others just accepted it. After all, stealth wasn't the point. Intimidation was. The sound of armored knights approaching was meant to terrify, and it did. But it also meant you could never truly rest, even when you were trying to sleep. The armor shifted and clinked with every breath. Some knights slept in partial armor, breastplate, and greaves, at a minimum, just in case of a night attack, which meant they never really slept well. Just a series of uncomfortable, metal-clad naps. So here's the truth. Life in armor was painful, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It protected you, yes, but it also confined you, exhausted you, hurt you, and you wore it anyway, because the alternative was worse, because without it, you were just flesh, vulnerable, mortal. With it, you were a knight, armored, enduring, and endurance, it turns out, was the whole point. You've learned to walk in it. You've learned to fight in it. You've even learned to sleep poorly in it. But here's what the songs never mention. Armor doesn't just protect you from your enemies. Sometimes it feels like it's trying to kill you itself. Let's talk about what happens when things go wrong. You're in battle, adrenaline pumping, chaos everywhere, and suddenly you take a hit not to your body, but to your armor. A mace strike dents your breastplate inward. Now, instead of a smooth curve protecting your ribs, you have a sharp metal crease digging into your chest with every breath. You can't stop to fix it. You can't remove it. You just have to keep fighting while your own armor slowly bruises you from the inside. Or maybe a sword catches the edge of your pauldron and jams the articulation. Now your shoulder won't rotate properly. Your sword arm is compromised, and the enemy has noticed. According to battlefield accounts from the 15th century, damaged armor killed knights almost as often as enemy weapons did. One French chronicle describes a knight whose dented helm pressed against his skull until he collapsed from the pressure hours after the blow that caused it. His armor didn't fail him. It just failed slowly. Then there's the horror of being trapped. Imagine this. You fall during battle, hard, and when you try to get up, you realize a buckle has caught on something, or a strap has tangled, or the dented plate is now pinning your arm against your side. You're stuck, underground, in full armor, surrounded by enemies. Panic sets in. You thrash, you pull. But the more you struggle, the worse it gets. This is how knights died. Not from lack of skill or courage, but from mechanical failure at the worst possible moment. Medieval military manuals actually include instructions for squires on how to quickly disassemble armor on a fallen knight, because sometimes the only way to save him was to cut him out of his own protection. The armor that took an hour to put on had to come off in seconds, or he'd die wearing it. Let's talk about what armor does to your body over time. You're carrying 60 to 80 pounds of metal every day. 4 years, your spine compresses. Your shoulders round forward from the constant weight. Your knees and hips wear down from the stress. By your 30s, you move like a man in his 50s. By your 40s, you can barely mount a horse without help. According to skeletal analyses of medieval knights, yes, archaeologists have studied their bones. Many show signs of severe arthritis, spinal damage, and joint deterioration. Some had compression fractures in their vertebrae just from wearing armor repeatedly. the medieval equivalent of occupational hazards, except there was no workers' comp, just pain. One English knight's will from 1403 mentions that he could no longer bear the weight of full harness and had to retire from active service. At age 42, he lived another 20 years in constant pain because his body had been destroyed by the very thing meant to protect it. And here's what really gets me. The scars armor leaves aren't always visible. There are the grooves in your shoulders where the straps dig in, the calluses on your hips where the cuirass rests, the permanent dent in your collarbones from years of supporting weight. You develop a distinctive walk, a forward lean, shoulders tight, steps careful. Other knights recognize it immediately. It's the walk of someone whose body has been reshaped by metal, and even when you take the armor off, you still feel it. Phantom weight pressing down. Your muscle memory is expecting the resistance that's no longer there. Some knights reported feeling naked, without armor, not because they felt vulnerable, but because they'd worn it so long it felt like part of their body. Medieval physicians referred to it as armor sickness, a condition in which the body became so accustomed to wearing metal that removing it caused dizziness, imbalance, and anxiety. You weren't just wearing armor, you were becoming it. Now let's talk about something nobody mentions: the smell. You sweat in armor a lot, and that sweat has nowhere to go. It soaks into the gambeson, which never fully dries between uses. It pulls in the creases of the plate. It ferments. After a week on campaign, you smell like a stable fire mixed with desperation, and you can't escape it. The smell is trapped inside the armor with you. Every breath you take, through that narrow helm slit, you're breathing your own funk. According to accounts from medieval campaigns, the smell inside a war camp was so bad that commanders had to position tents downwind of the armored knights. One chronicler described it as the stench of iron and rot, as if death himself had taken up. Metalworking. Poetic. Accurate. Horrifying. And in battle, it gets worse. Blood splashes onto your armor. Mud cakes into every joint. Bits of other things get stuck in the articulations. After a fight, cleaning your armor isn't just maintenance. It's a moral imperative. Your squire scrubs for hours. Vinegar and sand to remove rust. Oil to protect the metal. Prayers to remove the memories. But some stains never come out. Not from the armor. Not from your mind. Medieval armor often bore the marks of previous battles, dents, scratches, and discoloration. Some knights wore these scars proudly, proof of survival. Others had them repaired immediately. They didn't want to remember. Let's talk about injuries you get just from wearing armor. Blisters from friction. Raw skin where buckles rub. Pressure sores from long hours in the saddle while encased in metal. One particularly nasty issue, mail burn. When chainmail is struck hard, the rings don't always break. Sometimes they just compress, driving into your skin like tiny metal teeth. even with a gambeson underneath. A hard enough blow can leave a pattern of circular wounds across your flesh, like you've been bitten by a mechanical snake. Medieval medical texts describe treating these wounds with salves, bandages, and prayers. They often became infected, and infection in the medieval world could kill you just as surely as a sword. According to one 13th century surgeon's account, he treated a knight whose entire shoulder had become infected from mail burn after a tournament. The knight survived but lost use of his arm. His armor had protected him from being skewered, but it had also destroyed him. And here's the thing about pain, you can't show it. You're a knight. Knights don't complain. Knights don't wince. Knights don't admit that their bodies are screaming with every step. So, you smile, you nod, you tell your squire you're fine as he helps you out of armor that leaves bloody grooves in your skin. You drink to numb the pain, you pray for strength, and you put the armor back on the next day. Because what's the alternative? Admit weakness, retire, let everyone see that you're not invincible. No, you endure quietly, desperately. Medieval letters between knights occasionally reveal the truth. One letter from 1387 describes a knight writing to a friend, "My body rebels against the iron, but to admit it would be to surrender my name." So, he kept wearing it until his body finally gave out. Then there's what armor does to you mentally. Every time you put it on, you're preparing to be hurt, to hurt others, to possibly die. The ritual of arming becomes a kind of psychological armor, too. Each strap buckled is a wall built between you and your fear. But walls work both ways. They keep fear out, and they keep you trapped inside. Some knights developed ritual prayers, gestures, and specific orders for donning each piece. These weren't just superstitions, they were coping mechanisms. Control the process. Control the fear, but you never fully control it. The fear is always there, sealed inside the armor with you, and when you take the armor off at night, exhausted and aching, the fear doesn't leave. It just finds new places to hide. Let's talk about what happens when you can't get the armor off fast enough. You're wounded, badly, and you need treatment immediately. But first, someone has to remove 60 pounds of metal carefully, so they don't make the injury worse. Straps have to be cut, buckles pried loose, plates lifted away from wounds. Meanwhile, you're bleeding, fading, praying that your squire's hands are steady and fast. Medieval battlefield surgeons developed techniques for emergency armor removal, but even with skill and speed, the process took precious minutes. One account from the Battle of Crecy describes a knight who bled to death, while his companions tried desperately to remove his armor. The wound was survivable, but by the time they got to it, it was too late. His armor had protected him from the blade, but it had also prevented anyone from saving him. And here's what nobody prepares you for. Sometimes the armor doesn't come off at all. Knights killed in battle were often left in their armor because removing it was too difficult. to time-consuming, or simply to horrifying. Mass graves from medieval battles contain bodies still in full plate, rusted, corroded, fused with the remains inside. The armor that defined them in life became their tomb in death. Archaeological excavations reveal the grim reality. Some knights died in positions that suggest they were trapped, unable to move while the battle raged around them. Their final moments were spent not fighting, but struggling against their own equipment. So here's the brutal truth about life in armor. It saved you, but it also broke you. It made you powerful, but it also made you vulnerable in new ways. It defined who you were, but it also confined who you could be. Every day you wore it was a negotiation between protection and pain, between strength and suffering, and you never won that negotiation. You just survived it. One agonizing day at a time. But you wore it anyway, because without armor you weren't a knight. You were just a man with a sword, and in the medieval world that wasn't enough. So you buckled the straps, tightened the buckles, lowered the visor. You ignored the ache in your shoulders, the pressure on your spine, the way your body screamed. With every movement, you carried the weight, because that's what knights did. And if it killed you slowly from the inside out, one vertebra at a time, well, that was just the cost of wearing the title. Some knights found ways to cope. They commissioned light armor. They took breaks when they could. They trained their bodies to adapt. Others just pushed through. Stubbornness and pride in equal measure. And a few broke under the weight, literally or figuratively. Medieval records mention knights who retired due to weakness of the flesh, a polite code for bodies that simply couldn't take it anymore. They weren't cowards. They weren't failures. They were just human beings who'd spent decades carrying something humans weren't meant to carry. You learn to read your body's warnings. The twinge in your knee means rain is coming. The sharp pain in your shoulder means you've pushed too hard. The numbness in your fingers means the cold is winning. You become a walking medical chart. Every scar, every ache tells a story, and you share these stories with other knights quietly over drinks when no one else is listening. My left hip hasn't been right since Verneuil. This shoulder clicks every time I raise my sword. Been that way for 3 years. Sometimes my hands shake. I don't know why. These conversations are secret. Confessions of vulnerability in a world that demands strength. But they're also bonds. Proof that you're not alone in your suffering. And then one day you realize you can't do this anymore. Maybe it's a morning when you can't get out of bed without help. Maybe it's a training session where your body simply refuses to obey. Or maybe it's just the quiet, terrible knowledge that the next time you wear armor into battle, you might not come back. Not because you're not skilled, but because your body can't protect you anymore. That's when you know the armor has won. You've carried it for years, decades, even, and now it's carried you to the end. Some knights accepted this gracefully. They passed their armor to a son or squire. They retired to quieter lives. Others raged against it. They kept fighting, kept riding, kept pretending they were still the warriors they'd once been, until their bodies decided for them. So, when you think of medieval knights, don't just picture the shining armor. Picture what it costs to wear it, the pain, the exhaustion, the slow destruction of the body that carried it. Picture a man who could barely walk without limping, smiling as he rode past cheering crowds. Picture hands that shook from nerve damage, still gripping a sword with practiced ease. Picture a spine compressed by decades of weight, still standing straight in a ceremony. That was life in armor, not glory, not comfort, just endurance. And the knights who survived it? They didn't survive because the armor protected them. They survived because they were tougher than the steel they wore. Was medieval honor even real? You were told there was a code, a shining, noble creed to live by. Chivalry, they called it. The very word sparkled with promise like polished armor in morning light. It was meant to define what it was to be a knight. Bravery, courtesy, honor, protection of the weak, and reverence for the church. A lofty ideal, written in elegant scripts and praised from pulpit and poet alike. And then you rode into your first battle, watched a man in full heraldic splendor trample a retreating soldier, and realized the code is more of a suggestion. Let's be clear about what chivalry actually was. In theory, it's a code of conduct, a moral compass for those who carry swords, rooted in Christian values and feudal loyalty. It began as a way to temper violence with virtue. The church, ever anxious about the havoc wrought by idle knights, took pains to transform you from a hired blade into a holy defender. You were not simply to fight, but to fight rightly. In practice, however, chivalry is like a tapestry, grand at a distance, but fraying up close. The official tenets vary depending on which chronicler or cleric you ask, but some themes remain constant. Protect the innocent, defend the church, serve your lord loyally, show mercy to foes who yield, be honest, avoid unjust wars, and honor women, particularly those of noble birth. A fine list, admirable, even, and also inconvenient, because here's the thing, in the thick of battle, no one stops to recite their virtues. You swing. You survive. You follow orders even if they involve torching a village suspected of disloyalty. You take prisoners, yes, but mostly because they're worth ransom. Mercy has a market value. As for honesty, it's encouraged. Unless deception serves your lord better, a knight may be honorable in the abstract, but he becomes remarkably flexible when land or legacy is at stake. According to records from medieval courts, knights frequently justified lies, broken oaths, and tactical betrayals as necessary for the greater good. One 14th century legal case describes a knight who broke a sworn truce, then argued successfully that his lord's orders superseded his personal oath. The judge agreed. Case dismissed. So much for the sanctity of a knight's word. Protecting the weak sounds lovely in songs, but in the field, the weak are often collateral. If your lord requires a peasant uprising crushed, you ride. If a convoy of commoners stands between you and the enemy's grain supply, you don't go around, you go through. The poor admire knights from afar because they're rarely better off when one rides by. Picture this: a village is suspected of harboring enemy scouts. Your lord orders you to investigate thoroughly. You arrive with armed men. You question the villagers. No one admits anything because there's probably nothing to admit. But your lord expects results. So, you burn a few houses, rough up a few men, take hostages, mission accomplished. The village is secure, and the peasants, they hate you now. Fear you? Would cheer if you died tomorrow, but you tell yourself you were following orders, doing your duty, protecting the realm. That's how you sleep at night. Then there's the matter of women. The songs speak of courtly love, of gallant men pining in poetic torment for unreachable noble ladies. In truth, your relationship with women is defined more by property law than poetry. Marriage is political. Romance, when it exists, is fleeting, and the protection you offer depends heavily on class. A noble woman might be revered. A washerwoman, less so. Medieval laws actually reflect this. Crimes against noble women carried severe punishments. Crimes against peasant women often ignored entirely. One English legal record from 1312 shows a knight accused of assaulting a village girl. The case was dismissed because the woman was of low birth and the knight's reputation unblemished. His word against hers, and his word, of course, was worth more. So, when the code says honor women, what it really means is honor women who matter. The rest are negotiable. That's not to say knights are uniformly dishonorable. Many strive to live by the code. They pray. They tithe. They avoid unnecessary cruelty. But the world you inhabit rarely rewards restraint. A knight who hesitates to strike might not live to deliver mercy. A man who speaks the truth too plainly may find himself without land or head. According to chronicles from the 100 Years' War, several knights were executed or exiled not for disloyalty, but for excessive honesty in council, basically telling their lords things they didn't want to hear. Honesty is a virtue until it's inconvenient. Ask yourself, would you have been honest when it cost you everything? Or would you have learned to smile, nod, and say what needed to be said? Tournaments, oddly, are where chivalry shines brightest. In these staged spectacles, the rules are rigid. The honor is real. You salute your opponent. You show restraint. You lose with grace. It's theater, yes, but it's theater where the actors believe in the script, and for a moment the code becomes reality, if only briefly. In tournaments, there are consequences for breaking the rules. Foul play gets you disqualified. Excessive brutality gets you banned. Dishonorable conduct stains your reputation. It's one of the few places where chivalry actually has teeth. But here's the irony. Tournaments are performance. War is reality. And in war, the rules evaporate like morning mist. There are manuals actual written guides that lay out knightly conduct in florid detail. One might advise you not to strike an opponent who has lost his helm. Another might say that if a lady drops a glove, you should retrieve it without stepping on it or staring too long at her ankles. The Church writes its own rules more focused on piety. Attend Mass, confess sins, avoid gluttony, and above all, never forget who sanctioned your right to kill. These manuals are read aloud in courts and training halls. Some squires memorize them, others nod politely and return to sword drills, according to records from noble households. Chivalric manuals were often commissioned as gifts or passed down as heirlooms. They were meant to be aspirational, guides to an ideal that everyone acknowledged was impossible to fully achieve, but you were supposed to try anyway. In truth, the code is interpreted differently in every household. Some lords emphasize loyalty above all. Others demand ferocity. A few take chivalry so seriously that they disown sons for showing cowardice. Other knight boys who haven't seen a day of battle simply for the right marriage alliance. What you learn over time is that chivalry is not a sword to wield. It's a mirror. Some polish it daily, others shatter it for convenience. You yourself try to follow the spirit, if not the letter. You help your squire when no one's watching. You spare an enemy who's yielded, though your comrades jeer. You ride back to a burning hamlet to escort a limping peasant out because a child clutches your leg and says, "Please." These moments stay with you longer than most victories. They cost little. They feel like something old, something sacred, and yet no bard will ever sing of them. Here's what nobody tells you about chivalry. It's not about grand gestures. It's about small decisions made when no one is looking. It's about being decent in a profession built around destruction. It's about knowing you are a weapon and choosing, sometimes, not to strike. Still, the tension never vanishes. You kneel before a bishop one day and torch a granary the next. You cradle a wounded comrade, then trample a fleeing footman who happens to be in the way. You write your name beneath a pledge to honor and restraint, then sign orders that send starving men to their deaths. You begin to understand that the code of chivalry is less a shield and more a compass. It doesn't stop you from getting lost. It just gives you something to check when the fog sets in. Some days, that's enough. In the quieter hours, you reflect on the contradictions. The songs you once memorized speak of knights who slayed beasts and rescued virgins. Your life, meanwhile, consists of tax disputes, bloody marches, and aching knees. You were promised glory. You were handed logistics. And yet you don't resent it. Not entirely. Because sometimes the code helps you remember who you were supposed to be before the world got hold of you. You meet knights who abused the code. Who weaponized it? They quote scripture while pillaging. They preach honor and practice terror. You learn to recognize them by their polished crests and empty eyes. And you learn to step aside, or when given the rare chance, stand in their way. According to trial records from medieval courts, knights occasionally accused each other of false chivalry using the code's language while violating its spirit. These cases were messy, complicated and often politically motivated, but they prove one thing: people knew the difference between real honor and performance. They just didn't always care. You are not perfect. You've broken the code. You've struck men who had surrendered. You've taken spoils that weren't yours. You've stayed silent when you should have spoken. But you remember the faces of those who tried. The knight who held a gate so a village could flee. The one who refused to burn a monastery, even under threat of exile. The one who died kneeling not in surrender, but in prayer. And so, in your own way, you keep trying. You carry the code not in scripture, but in habit. You pick it up like your sword each morning, knowing it may slip from your grip by nightfall, but reaching for it anyway, because without it, you are merely a killer, and with it, maybe, just maybe, you are something more. This is chivalry, not what the minstrels sing, not what the priests preach, but what you try to practice in a world that gives you every reason not to. And so you ride, still bound to your oath. You defend your lord, fight his enemies, bury him dead, but you also feed your squire when the pantry runs low. You speak kindly to the old woman in the village who remembers when you were a boy. You return a dropped glove even when no one is watching. You are a knight, and you remember the code not because it makes you stronger, but because it reminds you what strength is for. One day, years from now, a boy will ask you what it means to be chivalrous. You won't recite scripture or point to crests. You'll hand him your sword and tell him to hold it steady. And then you'll ask if he can carry it without ever letting it fall on the wrong soul. That, you'll say, is a good place to start. Because in the end, chivalry isn't about purity. It's about persistence, about falling short and rising again, and choosing, however quietly, not to become the very thing you were once sworn to fight. Let's talk about what happens when the code collides with reality. You're ordered to execute prisoners. 20 men captured after a skirmish. Your lord wants those dead partly as punishment, partly as a message. The code says you should show mercy to those who yield. These men yielded. They're disarmed, defeated. But your lord's orders are clear, and disobeying a direct command, that's treason. So, what do you do? Some knights refused. They argued. They appealed to higher authorities. A few even resigned their positions rather than break their oaths. Others rationalized. Their enemy combatants. They would have killed us. This is war, not a tournament. And others just obeyed quietly, efficiently, then spent the rest of their lives trying not to think about it. According to records from the 100 Years' War, mass executions of prisoners were common, despite chivalric codes explicitly forbidding it. One French chronicler noted, "The knights spoke of honor at supper and ordered killings at dawn. Thus was the way of war." Here's where it gets even darker. Sometimes the code itself becomes a weapon. You challenge a rival to single combat not because you want justice, but because you know you'll win. You invoke honor and tradition while essentially committing legal murder. Or you accuse someone of breaking their oath, knowing they can't defend themselves without appearing guilty. The code in the wrong hands becomes a cudgel. Medieval legal records are full of honor disputes that were really just power plays wrapped in chivalric language. One case from 1389 describes a knight accusing another of cowardice, not because it was true, but because he wanted the man's land. The accused demanded trial by combat. The accuser hired a champion. The accused lost, was executed, and his lands were seized. Justice? No. But it was legal, and it was done in the name of honor. Picture this. You're at court. A nobleman you've never met stands and publicly accuses you of dishonoring a lady. A complete fabrication. But now you have to respond. Ignore it, and everyone assumes it's true. Challenge him, and you might die. Apologize, and you admit guilt. There's no good option. Just damage control. That's the reality of medieval honor culture. It's not about truth. It's about perception. Then there's the hypocrisy. Knights who preach chivalry in public but practice brutality in private. Lords who demand loyalty while betraying their own vassals. Priests who condemn violence while blessing weapons. You see it everywhere. And it makes you wonder, is anyone actually sincere? According to the private letters of medieval nobles, yes, historians have read their mail, and many knights were deeply cynical about chivalry. One letter from 1407, written by an English knight to his brother, includes this line: "They speak of honor as if it were coin, spending it freely in words while hoarding it in deeds." He wasn't wrong. But here's the thing. Even cynics sometimes act honorably, not because they believe in the code, but because they believe in themselves. They want to be better than the world around them, even if they fail, even if no one notices. Let's talk about the knights who actually tried, not the legends, not the saints, but the real men who struggled daily with the contradictions, like William Marshall, a historical knight who served 5 English kings. He was renowned for his chivalry, his skill in combat, and his loyalty. But his biography, written by a contemporary, reveals the compromises he made, the times he bent the rules, the moments when survival trumped honor. He was a good man in a brutal world, but good didn't mean perfect. It meant trying. Or Bertrand du Guesclin, a French knight during the 100 Years' War, known for his tactical brilliance and his strict adherence to codes of conduct. But even he executed prisoners when politically necessary. Even he burned villages that resisted. The code was his guide, but reality was his master. According to chroniclers who knew him, du Guesclin reportedly said, "I serve honor as best I can, but I serve France first." That's the real chivalry, not the fantasy version, the messy, compromised human version. Ask yourself, what would you have done? Would you have been the knight who refused to execute prisoners, even if it cost you your position? Or would you have been the one who obeyed, telling yourself it was necessary? Would you have challenged corruption, even when it meant making powerful enemies? Or would you have stayed silent, protecting your own interests? There's no right answer, because in the medieval world, every choice had consequences. stand on principle, and you might lose everything. Compromise, and you might lose yourself. Most knights found a middle path. They bent when they had to. They stood firm when they could. They weren't heroes. They were survivors. But here's what gives me hope about the whole thing. Despite everything, the hypocrisy, the compromises, the failures, the code mattered. Even when it was broken, people knew it was being broken. Even when it was ignored, people felt its absence. The ideal existed, and that meant something. According to medieval literature, the stories knights told themselves. The greatest tragedy wasn't failing to achieve perfect honor. It was stopping trying. The knights in these stories stumble. They make mistakes. They fall short. But the noble ones keep trying. Keep reaching for something better. That's the real message of chivalry. Not perfection. Persistence. Let's talk about what chivalry became. As the medieval period waned and the Renaissance began, chivalry transformed from a practical code into a nostalgic fantasy. By the 16th century, knights were obsolete. Gunpowder had made armor useless. Professional armies had replaced feudal levies. But the stories remained. In fact, they grew. Books like Le Morte d'Art for romanticized chivalry, stripping away the messy reality and leaving only the shining ideal. People who'd never worn armor or fought a battle could now read about perfect knights who always did the right thing. It was comforting, inspiring, completely divorced from reality. According to historians, this chivalric revival influenced everything from Victorian literature to modern fantasy novels. The knights in our imaginations, noble, pure, uncomplicated, are descendants of this sanitized version. The real knights, the complicated, flawed, struggling men, they've been mostly forgotten. But maybe that's okay, because what we remember isn't always what matters most. The ideal of chivalry, the belief that we should strive to be better, kinder, braver, that's worth preserving. Even if the reality was messy, even if most people failed. The fact that they tried matters. You tried. Despite the pressure, despite the pain, despite every reason to give up or give in, you held on to something, a belief that there was a right way to do things. Even when no one was watching, you didn't always succeed, but you tried. So, was medieval honor even real? Yes and no. The code existed. The ideals were real. The aspirations are genuine. But the practice? That was complicated. Honor was real when it was tested. When a knight chose mercy over vengeance. When he told the truth, even though a lie would have been easier. But honor was also performance, a social currency, a tool used to gain an advantage or avoid shame. It was both a sincere belief and a cynical manipulation, often at the same time, sometimes by the same person. According to modern historians who study medieval culture, chivalry was less a fixed code and more a negotiated ideal constantly redefined by circumstances, power dynamics, and individual conscience In other words, it was human, flawed, contradictory, but also capable of moments of genuine nobility. Here's what you learned. Honor isn't something you have. It's something you do. It's not a title or a ceremony. It's a choice made over and over in small moments that no one sees. You learn that the code can't protect you from hard choices. It can only guide you through them. You learn that sometimes being honorable means losing, and you do it anyway. You learn that perfection isn't possible, but effort is. And maybe that's enough, because centuries from now, when historians study the medieval period, they won't just see the battles and the politics. They'll see the struggle, the attempt to be better in a world that rewarded being worse. They'll see knights who failed but kept trying. And maybe, just maybe, they'll understand that's what honor really was. Not the shining armor, not the perfect hero, but the flawed man who kept reaching for something better. The one who fell short 1,000 times and got up 1,001. The one who knew the code was impossible and followed it anyway. That was you? Imperfect, compromised, trying, a knight. Not because you never broke the code, but because even when you did, you still believed in what it stood for, and you kept going. Through the doubt, through the failures, through the knowledge that you'd never measure up to the ideal. You kept going, and with each choice, however small, however quiet, you drew your sword a little straighter, because in the end, medieval honor wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, being accountable, being willing to try. And you tried, day after brutal day, year after exhausting year. You tried, and in a world built on violence, compromise and power, that meant everything. So, when the songs fade and the legends blur, remember this: the real knights weren't the ones who never fell. They were the ones who got back up. You got back up, and that's the only honor that ever mattered. Why didn't the wait end after the armor? You survive your first battle, then another, and though one never truly ends, it does go quiet. Armies disband, swords are sheathed, the banners come down. For a while, there is peace. But a knight with no war is a weapon left idle, and idle weapons tend to rust. So you return home, back to your manor, back to your hall, back to the life you barely remember living. And that's when you realize the armor comes off easily. The weight, that stays. Let's talk about what happens after the battle, after the campaign, after you've watched men die and somehow survived yourself. You ride home, people cheer, they throw flowers, they call you a hero, and you smile, you wave, you play the part, but inside you're still on that field, still hearing the screams, still seeing the faces. The medieval chroniclers rarely wrote about this. They focused on victories, defeats, territories gained or lost. They didn't write about the knight who flinched at the sound of a door slamming, or the one who couldn't sleep without a weapon within reach. They didn't write about the weight that stayed even when the armor came off. But the evidence is there, if you know where to look. According to letters from medieval knights, yes, some wrote about it, the return home was often harder than the campaign itself. One English knight, writing to his brother in 1346 after the Battle of Crécy, described it this way: "The body returns, but something remains on the field. I know not what to call it. I only know I am less than I was. He wasn't alone." Another letter from a French knight in 1376 mentions dreams that rob me of rest and a heart that startles at shadows. These weren't seen as wounds. There was no word for trauma, no concept of what we'd now call PTSD. You were just changed, and you dealt with it, or you didn't. According to records from medieval monasteries, many knights retired to monastic life after campaigns, not out of sudden religious devotion, but because the quiet routine offered something their old lives couldn't: peace. Structure, a place where the weight felt a little lighter. Picture this: you're home. Your wife greets you warmly. Your children barely recognize you. You've been gone for months, maybe years. The hall is prepared for a feast in your honor. Everyone wants to hear your stories. So, you tell them. You describe the march, the deployment, the charge. You leave out the parts that matter: the mud, the screams, the boy soldier who died calling for his mother. You make it sound glorious, because that's what they want to hear, and because saying what it was really like would make them look at you differently. So, you smile, you drink, you accept their praise, and late that night, alone in your chamber, you sit in the dark and wonder why you feel more isolated now than you ever did on campaign. The weight shows up in strange ways. You snap at your squire over nothing. You can't focus during Mass. You drink more than you used to. You avoid certain sounds: clanging metal, horses running, and anything that echoes the battlefield. You find yourself checking exits, sitting with your back to the wall, scanning crowds for threats that aren't there. Your wife notices. You seem distant. She says. You tell her you're fine. You tell yourself you're fine. But you both know it's a lie. According to household accounts from noble estates, there was often a spike in wine purchases after lords returned from campaigns. One 14th century steward's ledger notes, the master requests double the usual quantity. He says it aids his sleep. It didn't, but it helped him forget, for a few hours at least. Let's talk about the guilt. You survived. Others didn't. Men who were braver than you, stronger than you, better than you, maybe. And yet here you are alive home, while they're rotting in unmarked graves. Why? There's no answer. Just the weight of knowing you're here and they're not. Medieval confession records, priests kept notes. Remember showing knights confessing survivors' sin. One record from 1401 describes a knight who couldn't stop thinking about the men who died under his command. He confessed the same guilt every week for 3 years. The priest absolved him each time, but absolution didn't lift the weight. Nothing did. Ask yourself, could you have lived with that? Knowing that your survival might have been random, that there was no noble reason you made it, and others didn't. Then there's the anger at your lord for sending you, at the enemy for fighting back, at God for letting it happen, at yourself for not being strong enough to just move on. You're supposed to be a knight. Knights don't break. They endure, but you're breaking slowly, in ways no one can see. You lose your temper over small things. A servant spills wine. A horse moves wrong. Your squire asks an innocent question, and you explode, then immediately regret it, then hate yourself for losing control. According to records from medieval courts, domestic disputes involving knights increased significantly in the months following major campaigns. One case from 1357 describes a knight who struck his wife during an argument, something he'd never done before. When questioned, he said, "I know not what came over me. I am not myself." The court dismissed the charges, but the damage was done. And here's what really gets brutal. No one understands. Your fellow knights? They're dealing with their own weight. They're not talking about it either. Your family? They're grateful you're home. They don't want to hear that you're struggling. The church tells you to pray harder, have more faith, trust in God's plan. None of it helps. You're surrounded by people, and you've never felt more alone. According to chronicles from the period, several knights simply left, abandoned their estates, walked away from their titles. Some became hermits, others wandered. A few were never heard from again. One account from 1388 describes a knight who left everything behind with a note that read, "I cannot be what you need me to be. Forgive me." His family searched for years. They never found him. Let's talk about the nightmares. They come without warning. You're back on the field. The chaos, the blood, the dying. You wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. For a moment, you don't know where you are. Then reality crashes back. You're home. You're safe. But you don't feel safe. Medieval medical texts occasionally mention troubled sleep following battle, but only in passing. It wasn't considered a serious condition. One physician's manual from the 13th century recommends warm milk and prayer before bed for nights with restless nights. Warm milk. For trauma, sure, that'll fix it. And then there's the numbness. After a while, the sharp emotions dull. You stop feeling much of anything. You go through the motions. Manage your estate. Attend court. Fulfill your duties. But it's all hollow, mechanical. You're present, but not really there. Your wife asks what you're thinking. You realize you've been staring at the wall for an hour and have no idea what you were thinking about. Nothing. Everything. The space between. According to letters between noble families, this emotional distance was sometimes noticed and commented on, but always politely. Lord Edmund seems contemplative since his return, so William has become a man of fewer words. Euphemisms, because saying he's broken and we don't know how to help wasn't acceptable. Here's what nobody tells you. The weight doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it differently. Some days are better. Some days are worse. You develop coping mechanisms, routines, distractions. You throw yourself into work, manage your lands obsessively, train harder than necessary. Anything to keep the weight from crushing you. You avoid certain places, certain sounds, certain conversations. You learn what triggers the memories and you dance around them carefully. It's exhausting, but it's survival. According to records from medieval households, many knights developed highly structured daily routines after returning from war, waking at the same time, following the same patterns. One steward's journal describes his lord's schedule. He rises at dawn, inspects the fields, trains until noon, dines alone, works until vespers, retires early. He has not varied this routine in 2 years. Structure, control. The illusion that if you keep everything in order, the chaos can't return. And here's the cruel irony. The world expects you to be the same, to pick up where you left off, but you're not the same. You can't be. You've seen too much, done too much, lost too much. The person who left for war, he didn't come back. Someone else is wearing his armor, living in his hall, carrying his name, and everyone pretends not to notice the difference, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that war costs more than lives. It costs souls, and medieval society wasn't ready to have that conversation. So, you smile, you nod, you play the role, and you carry the weight. You learn to live with ghosts, not the religious kind, not spirits haunting halls or rattling chains, but the ghosts of men you knew, men who died, men whose faces you remember more clearly than your own children's. They don't haunt your halls, they haunt you. Let's talk about the faces. They come back at the worst times, during mass-dotted meals, in quiet moments when your guard is down. You see the young squire who took an arrow meant for you. The sergeant held the line while everyone else retreated. The enemy soldier whose eyes met yours in the instant before your blade struck. You remember them all, whether you want to or not. According to letters from medieval knights, this was common though rarely discussed openly. One letter from 1403, written by a German knight to his confessor, describes, "I see them in my waking hours. I see them in my dreams. They do not speak, but their silence accuses me nonetheless." The confessor's reply, preserved in the same archive, offered prayers and penance, but no real answers, because there weren't any. You can't pray away memory. You can't confess away guilt that has no clear source. You survived. That's not a sin, but it feels like one. Picture this, you're at a feast. Everyone's celebrating. Music, laughter, and wine flowing freely. And suddenly, without warning, you're back there. On the field. The smell of blood. The sound of screaming. You're frozen. Can't move. Can't breathe. Someone asks if you're all right. You snap back. Force a smile. Just tired, you say. They accept it. They always do. But inside, You're still on that field, still surrounded by the dead. These episodes, we call them flashbacks now, weren't understood in medieval times. If you mentioned them, people might think you were being haunted by demons, or cursed, or possessed. So, you kept quiet, and you learned to hide the moments when the past crashed into the present. The weight affects everything. Your relationships, your work, your faith. You find it harder to connect with people, harder to care about things that used to matter. A land dispute between peasants, trivial. A social slight at court, meaningless. You've seen men die for nothing. Everything else feels like theatre. Your wife tries to reach you. Your children ask why you're always sad. You tell them you're not sad. You're fine. Everything's fine. But they feel the distance, the wall you've built between yourself and the world. According to records from medieval noble families, marriages often struggled after campaigns. Not from infidelity or cruelty, but from emotional absence. One noblewoman's letter from 1390 describes her husband. He is here in body, but lost in some distant place I cannot reach. I grieve for the man who left, who may never truly return. She stayed. Most did. But the relationship was never the same. Let's talk about the triggers. Certain sounds, certain smells, certain sights. A horse's scream, the clash of metal, the smell of smoke. Any of these can transport you back instantly, without warning. You develop strategies to avoid them. You skip tournaments. Too many echoes of battle. You leave feasts early, to loud, to chaotic. You prefer solitude, not because you're antisocial, but because it's safer, quieter, less likely to trigger the memories. Medieval household records occasionally note changes in lords' behaviors after campaigns. One steward's journal from 1377 records, the master no longer attends the spring tournament. He says the noise troubles him. He prefers to remain on the estate. Another, from 1401, Lord William has requested we ring the chapel bell more softly. He says loud sounds disturb his concentration. These weren't demands, they were accommodations, quiet negotiations with a world that had become too loud. And here's what really breaks you. You can't explain it, not even to yourself. Why does the sound of rain on the roof make your heart race? Why do you flinch when someone approaches from behind? Why can't you just be normal? You tell yourself to get over it, to move on, to be strong. But strength isn't the issue. This isn't a weakness, it's an injury. Except there's no wound you can point to, no scar to show, no broken bone that needs setting, just something inside that doesn't work the way it used to. According to medieval medical understanding, there was no framework for this, no concept of psychological injury. If your body were intact, you would be fine. End of discussion. So, you suffered in silence, because there was no language to describe what you were experiencing. Ask yourself, what would you have done? How would you have coped in a world that didn't believe your wounds were real? Some knights found outlets. They poured themselves into religious devotion, spent hours in prayer, made pilgrimages, donated to churches, not always from faith, sometimes from desperation, a need to feel clean, to atone for things they couldn't name. Others channeled everything into work, managing estates obsessively, training constantly, keeping so busy they didn't have time to think. And others? They drank, gambled, sought distraction in anything that would quiet the noise in their heads. Medieval account books show patterns: increased wine consumption, larger donations to churches, more frequent attendance at confession. One knight's household ledger from 1388 shows he confessed every single day for 3 years after returning from a campaign. Every single day. Whatever weight he carried, he was desperate to put it down. Then there are the ones who couldn't carry it anymore, the ones who simply broke. Some abandoned everything, walked away from titles, lands, families. Others found quieter exits. Medieval records don't usually record suicide. It was considered a mortal sin, and families covered it up. But sometimes you can read between the lines. Died of melancholy, fell from his horse under mysterious circumstances, found drowned in the river. Not all accidents are accidents. According to church burial records, there's a noticeable number of knights who died suddenly or of unknown causes in the months and years following major campaigns. Some were probably genuine accidents, some were illnesses, but some were men who couldn't carry the weight anymore and chose to put it down permanently. Here's the thing that haunts me about all this: they had no support, no understanding, no treatment. If this happened today, we'd call it PTSD. We'd have therapy, medication, and support groups. Not perfect solutions, but something. They had nothing. Just expectations to be strong and silent judgment if they showed weakness. And they carried it anyway. For years, decades, entire lifetimes. That's not a weakness. That's endurance on a level most of us can't comprehend. They survived wars, and then they survived coming home, which was sometimes the harder battle. Let's talk about the good days, because they were good days. Not many, maybe, that they existed. Days when the weight felt lighter, when you could almost pretend to be the person you used to be. You'd laugh at a joke, play with your children, sleep through the night without nightmares. These moments were rare, precious. You held on to them like lifelines, and they proved something important. You weren't completely broken, just bent or damaged, but not destroyed. According to letters between knights, these good days were often mentioned with almost desperate gratitude. I slept well last night. It has been weeks. I found myself smiling today. I had forgotten the feeling. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. You learn to measure success differently, not by glory or wealth, but by getting through the day, by managing your estate despite the exhaustion, by being present for your family even when you feel absent, by choosing to stay even when leaving seemed easier. Every day you didn't collapse under the weight, that was a victory. Every night you made it through without completely falling apart, success. The bar was lower, but clearing it mattered just as much. According to the few surviving personal journals from medieval knights, this theme appears repeatedly. Gratitude for simply surviving another day. One entry from 1396, I woke. I rose. I tended my duties. I did not fail. This is enough. Not I conquered or I achieved or I triumphed. Just, I survived. And that's enough. And slowly, very slowly, some found ways to heal. Not completely. You never fully return to who you were before. But you adapt. You find new ways of being. You build a life around the weight instead of under it. You connect with other veterans who understand without you having to explain. You find purpose in teaching young squires not just combat, but how to survive what comes after. You discover that talking helps, even if it's just to one trusted friend. One brother in arms who carries similar ghosts. According to records from the Knights Confraternities and Brotherhoods of Veterans, these groups often gathered regularly, officially for prayers and almsgiving, but the real purpose? Fellowship, understanding, a place where the weight could be acknowledged without shame. One confraternity's rules from 1410 include this line: brothers shall speak freely of their burdens, and no man shall judge another for the weight he carries. They knew. They understood. And in that understanding, there was a kind of healing. You also found meaning in the small things. The way sunlight hits the courtyard at dawn, the sound of your daughter's laughter, a good horse, a quiet evening. Things you barely noticed before now feel significant, precious, because you'd seen how quickly everything could be taken away. So you held on to the good moments more tightly, appreciated them more deeply. This wasn't weakness or sentimentality. It was a perspective earned through loss, and strangely, the weight gave you this, made you appreciate what remained. Here's what you tell that young squire. Now, if you could, the armor comes off, but the weight stays. And that's not your fault. It's not a weakness. It's not failure. It's just what happens when you carry things humans weren't meant to carry. You'll have bad days, days when the weight feels unbearable, when you wonder if it's worth continuing. And you'll have better days, days when the sun breaks through, when you remember why you kept going. Both are real, both are valid. The trick is to keep moving forward, one day at a time, one breath at a time. Find people who understand. Talk when you can. Rest when you need to. And know this: surviving is enough. You don't have to be the hero in the song. You just have to be here. That's the real courage. Not the battlefield kind. The everyday kind. The kind that gets you out of bed when everything hurts. That keeps you trying when giving up seems easier. That's the weight you'll carry. The one no one sees. The one song celebrates. But it's real. And carrying it, that makes you stronger than any armor ever could. So yes, the armor came off, the steel was removed, the straps unbuckled, the weight of the metal lifted, but the other weight, the invisible one, that stayed, and you carried it every single day, through the nightmares and the flashbacks, through the guilt and the grief, through the moments when you wondered if you'd ever feel whole again. You carried it, not because you were strong, not because you were brave, but because you had no choice, and because somewhere, deep down, you believed that tomorrow might be lighter than today. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't, but you kept going anyway. And that, more than any battle won, any tournament victory, and any oath sworn, was your greatest achievement. You survived. Not just the war, but what came after. You carried the weight that no one else could see, and you're still here. That's what being a knight really meant. In the end, not the glory, not the honor, not the songs, just the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the weight break you, even when it tried, even when it came close. You carried it, and that was enough, and so the night falls quiet, carrying their whispers into silence. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss another whisper in the night. Until we meet again, good night.